This is the Marxists at the Movies podcast.
Scene opens, white lights dim down low. The cinema whispers where truths can grow. From shadows deep and screens ignite, the proletariat comes alive tonight. Marxists at the movies, bright and raw, breaking through the reels to rewrite the law. Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting the name.
Welcome, comrades. This is Marxists at the Movies, the podcast where we drag pop culture into the dialectic, kicking and screaming. Because cinema is never neutral, and neither is television. We took a week off, but now we're continuing our Pride Month celebration. I'm your host, Edward Michael Francis.
And I'm also your host, Edward Michael Francis. Yes, both of us, on purpose. Don't worry about it.
Now, I know what you're all thinking. Edward, what happened to those wonderful and charming AI hosts? Great question. They bailed. Yeah, Google's algorithm just straight up stopped listening to me, so now I'm doing all the production myself. We're moving on up to the east side, to the danger zone, where everybody knows your name. Enjoy the upgrade. Welcome to our TV Spotlight bonus series, where we break from film to examine moments in television that ruptured the culture industry in ways it never fully recovered from. Today's episode is focused on the original Ellen sitcom, and more specifically, the Puppy episode, a seismic event in queer media history that both liberated and punished its star in equal measure.
Spoiler warning, obviously. We're not going to pretend this aired yesterday, but if you didn't know, Ellen came out on network TV and torched her entire career for a decade, so now you know.
This discussion is based on the article Ellen, Visibility, Backlash, and the Cost of Being First, written by me, Edward Michael Francis.
It's up on our Patreon right now if you want to read the deep dive version, but more about that later.
We'll be pulling in other sources, press coverage, cast interviews, academic analysis, because no work lives in a vacuum, and Ellen's story was never just hers. It was everyone's, especially if you were watching in the closet.
Right?
Before Ellen DeGeneres became a lightning rod for queer visibility or a brand mascot for pastel daytime kindness, she was something far less scripted. A working comic in smoky 1980s comedy clubs. Her material was tight, restrained, weirdly philosophical. She joked about God, telephones, seatbelts, mundane things, until they bent towards absurdity. Her style was clean but subversive, built on quiet misdirection and perfectly deployed pause. She stood out not because she was loud, but because she was still. In a sea of manic punchlines and aggressive delivery, Ellen was the calm in the center of the storm.
You might say she was the eye of the hurricane with a mullet.
Exactly. By the time she got her big break on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson in 1986, she had already mastered her rhythm. Her set that night about calling God on the phone was a masterclass in escalation. Carson not only laughed, he called her over to the couch.
Wow.
That wasn't just a compliment. That was an industry coronation. She was the first female comic to be invited to sit on the couch after a debut set. That move cracked open the door to sitcom deals, talk show appearances, and eventually her own series. But it also meant something else. Ellen had become a product. Marketable, palatable, sellable to middle America.
Which, as we all know, is code for stay in the closet and smile nice for the sponsors.
The persona that broke through wasn't Ellen the whole person. It was Ellen the brand concept. Quirky, non-threatening, pleasantly asexual. Queer audiences recognized the coded silences immediately, but the broader culture just saw a funny woman who isn't like other girls. She wasn't doing political comedy. She wasn't even out. But something about her already felt subversive.
Yep.
It was in the timing, the pauses, the tension. She knew how to build a joke around what she wasn't saying.
Sure.
And that would come to define her entire career.
She was saying, I'm gay without the punchline, and somehow that was still dangerous.
In 1994, ABC premiered a new sitcom called These Friends of Mine. It was conceived as an ensemble piece. Part Mad About You, part Seinfeld, part 30-something.
Correct.
Ellen DeGeneres played Ellen Morgan, a neurotic, mildly chaotic bookstore owner in Los Angeles surrounded by an oddball friend group. The show was built to blend in.
True.
But then something else happened. NBC's Friends was announced, and it terrified ABC. 2 ensemble sitcoms about attractive Gen Xers in big cities was one too many.
Oof.
And so the network pivoted. These Friends of Mine was retooled into Ellen, and Ellen Morgan became the central focus.
That's when the show went from, what if we were quirky and hung out, to, what if this woman is barely holding it together in a capitalist hellscape, and also maybe gay?
With the focus shifted to Ellen Morgan, the show found its voice, and while it still followed sitcom structure, cafes, misunderstandings, punchlines, it quickly began to subvert the genre.
For sure.
Ellen Morgan wasn't a glamorous lead. She wasn't hypersexualized. She wasn't even confident. She was nervous, awkward,
Absolutely.
prone to rambling. She deflected intimacy with jokes and sabotaged every romantic prospect that came near her. That performance at the time was read as relatable, but for queer viewers, it resonated as something else entirely.
Closet realness. If you know, you know.
Right. By the second season, something strange was happening. Audiences laughed, but they also saw themselves in her fumbling. It was the first time a network show had built an entire series around a woman who didn't know how to belong, and more importantly, didn't pretend to.
For sure.
Behind the scenes, producers Neil Marlins and Carol Black laid the foundation for what was, in hindsight, a carefully constructed identity crisis. Ellen Morgan wasn't out, but she wasn't comfortable either.
Totally.
The show wrote around her romantic life. Episodes would introduce male suitors only to discard them by the second act. Ellen would flinch at intimacy, change the subject, sabotage a kiss.
The straights called it quirky. The queers called it Tuesday.
It became the most obvious not secret on television, and the network knew it. Writers started floating test balloons. One episode in season 3 is literally called The Tape.
No.
A storyline about Ellen accidentally recording over a sexy email from a man, which she plays off with visible panic.
No way.
In another, she blurts out to her friends that she has something important to tell them, only to say, I'm Lebanese. You mean lesbian? Someone asks. No, Lebanese, she insists. It was a wink, a flare in the dark. The audience laughed, but the intention was clear. Even the famous puppy episode contained these jokes, opening with Ellen hiding in a closet and her friends encouraging her to come out already. Her response? Hold your horses, I've got an hour.
It was the late night, don't worry, I'm just joking, of queerness, except nobody was laughing harder than the queers at home.
Eventually, the network would be forced to confront what the show had already been implying. Ellen wasn't just quirky. She wasn't just unlucky in love, she was gay. And the tension between what the show was allowed to say and what it was trying to say built until it exploded.
Absolutely.
But before that happened, before the puppy episode, before the media firestorm, Ellen quietly revolutionized what a sitcom lead could look like. She didn't have to be sexy, she didn't have to be straight, she didn't have to win. She just had to exist.
And existing as a queer person under capitalism? That's the most radical plotline of all.
Right. Before the puppy episode shook the airwaves, Ellen was already doing subversive work. Most sitcoms of the 90s led with overproduced theme songs and polished ensemble introductions. But Ellen?
Nope.
It often skipped the theme song entirely, opening cold.
Right?
No cue to laugh, no emotional priming, just awkward silence, uncomfortable stares, or Ellen's deadpan punchlines landing with a thud.
Nice.
That wasn't a production quirk. It was a statement. It told viewers, this isn't going to go how you think it will. It was a rejection of television's synthetic warmth. Even in the most mundane episodes, the show hinted at disruption. It was preparing its audience subtly for something seismic.
And as Ellen herself in a 1996 Entertainment Weekly interview said, I never liked the idea of spoon-feeding people how they should feel before the show even starts. Let them figure it out.
This cast wasn't just assembled for laughs. Each one symbolized something deeper. Threads in a tangled web of identity, labor, queerness, and cultural expectation.
Sounds good.
Ellen Morgan. Neurotic, hesitant, hyperverbal. She was anxious, not adorable. Defensive, not quirky. And that made her revolutionary. She wasn't just the every woman. She was the unmarketable woman.
Absolutely.
And the sitcom tried to make her lovable without sanding off those edges. Paige Clark, played by Jolie Fisher, was the aspirational capitalist mess. Fashionable, poised, brittle as hell. She represented careerism's toll. Always on the edge of a breakdown, always dressed to impress. The perfect foil for Ellen's slow burn authenticity arc.
Okay.
Joe Farrell, the barista with a scowl. Working class, overeducated, underpaid. His dry wit came with an undertow of exhaustion. Played by David Anthony Higgins, he was the Gen X burnout before it was a meme.
Ooh, nice.
Audrey Penny, played by Clea Lewis. Obnoxiously cheerful, yes, but also stubbornly kind. Her cheerfulness wasn't ignorance, it was resistance. She smiled like it was a weapon.
Yep.
Spence Kovac, played by Jeremy Piven, the cousin whose resume was a roulette wheel. 1 week a lawyer, the next a doctor, the next unemployed again. The professional drifter, a stand-in for a generation promised stability and delivered chaos.
Yikes.
Adam Green, played by Air Gross, is Ellen's initial male roommate and the heteronormative placeholder. There because early 90s TV couldn't conceive of a lead without a male counterweight. A transitional object the show would eventually outgrow. Peter Barnes, openly gay and not killed off, tokenized, or sanitized.
Wow.
Played by Patrick Bristow, who later said, there weren't many blueprints for characters like Peter. We were flying blind and proud of it. His presence signaled where the show was going, even if it couldn't say it yet. Lori Manning, Ellen's eventual girlfriend. Understated, supportive, not cast for spectacle. Lisa Darr played her with restraint, and in doing so, they modeled a queer relationship that wasn't defined by trauma or tragedy.
It was an ensemble built like a Molotov cocktail. Every piece played a part in the explosion.
Then came April 30th, 1997, the puppy episode. 42 million people tuned in to see Ellen Morgan and Ellen DeGeneres say, I'm gay.
Boom.
Not whisper it, not hint, say it.
Oof.
On a public PA in an airport with Oprah as her therapist. This wasn't just a revival. It was a cultural detonation. The laugh track stopped. The tension was real. It wasn't the coy, very special episode of other sitcoms. It was confessional, political, raw. And the aftermath? Immediate.
No.
Sponsors pulled out. Affiliates refused to air the show. Ellen's career stalled. But the doors stayed open for people behind her.
And Ellen later told Oprah's masterclass, it felt like I was jumping off a cliff, but I knew I had to do it. I had to be honest with myself and with the audience.
That honesty cost her. But it also carved out space. Queer youth who had never seen themselves on screen, who had only seen mockery or metaphor, got a mirror instead.
Right.
The episode's title, a network executive once joked Ellen could only get ratings if she had a puppy or something. So she did. But the puppy was queerness, authenticity, and defiance. This was no longer about punchlines. It was about being seen.
And once you've been seen, you can't go back to hiding.
We'll continue our story in just a moment.
Each flickers with a revolutionary beam. The heroes rise from the factory floor, challenging the scripts and demanding more.
And then, just like that, it all fell apart. After the puppy episode, the backlash was fast, coordinated, and cruel. Advertisers pulled like the show had become toxic waste. JCPenney, Chrysler, Wendy's, all fled. The kind of silence that gets loud real fast.
Denied.
ABC, who had aired the episode with fanfare, suddenly got cold feet. Promotion stopped. Public support vanished. The same network that broadcast her bravery now labeled the show too political. Ellen went from trailblazer to pariah in less than a year, and by 1998, Ellen was off the air.
That's Hollywood for you. Applaud the boundary pushers just long enough to figure out how to bury them.
Right. Well, let's call it what it was. A punishment. Not just for being gay, for being unapologetic about it, for not softening the blow, for not winking at the audience and saying, don't worry, I'm still relatable.
Right?
She didn't play the victim. She told the truth. And Hollywood, the same system that had tolerated decades of closeted actors and sanitized queer punchlines, slammed the door in her face.
Yep.
This is the part nobody romanticizes. The in-between. The career purgatory.
The we love you, just not right now phase.
She wasn't just unbooked. She was unmentionable. For years, no major projects, no industry backing, no reruns. Being honest on television had become a scandal.
Correct.
That's not just homophobia. That's ideological enforcement.
Absolutely.
She tried. God, she tried. In 2001, CBS gave her a shot with The Ellen Show, but it felt hesitant, defanged, like the industry wanted her back, but only if she played small. The show avoided politics, avoided queerness, avoided risk. Audiences noticed. It flopped. The same year, she voiced a revamped version of Disney's Ellen's Energy Adventure, a climate-focused ride at Epcot. Corporate Disney wrapping her in a family-friendly environmentalism as if that could launder away the memory of the puppy episode.
Yeah, because nothing says queer radicalism like a sponsored animatronic dinosaur.
Exactly. These projects didn't fail because Ellen had lost her touch. They failed because they weren't her.
Sure.
They were reactionary damage control. And worse, they were a reminder. America would only welcome queerness back on its terms. Sanitized, smiling, safe. And Ellen DeGeneres, who had once looked into the camera and shattered the illusion, was suddenly being asked to play make-believe again.
Okay.
After the fallout came the long silence, but then came a fish. In 2003, Ellen DeGeneres lent her voice to a blue tang with memory problems and a heart of gold. Finding Nemo wasn't just a hit, it was a resurrection. Dory was funny, chaotic, lovable, and disarming. The public that had turned its back on Ellen now embraced her again, so long as she didn't talk about why they'd turned away in the first place.
She came back as a fish. That's not even a joke. It's Disney magic and cultural amnesia working overtime.
But it worked. Finding Nemo grossed nearly $1 billion. Suddenly, Ellen was marketable again, not as the queer woman who risked her voice for the truth, but as a voice, a cartoon, a mascot.
Right.
That paved the way for the Ellen DeGeneres Show, which debuted later that year. It was bright, it was safe, it was full of dancing and giveaways and good vibes. A carefully curated redemption arc wrapped in pastel.
It was the anti-puppy episode. No rupture, no reckoning, just vibes and free iPads.
Well, the message was clear. We'll take you back, Ellen, but only if you're nice. And for a while she was. She played the game, she became a household name again, but behind the scenes, something was rotting. In 2020, the mask cracked. Reports surfaced of a toxic work environment behind the scenes at the Ellen DeGeneres Show. Former staffers described intimidation, racism, fear. The persona, the dance-happy, gift-giving, be-kind Ellen, shattered.
The industry that once punished her for being too real was now punishing her for being too fake.
And it hit different this time, because it wasn't about homophobia. It was about labor, about power, about image management that had lost its grip. Ellen issued apologies, ratings dropped, celebrity defenders stayed mostly quiet, and by 2022, the show was over. No flames, no finale, just a shrug. Now, I loved Ellen. I watched the puppy episode live. I was young, barely even self-aware, but when she said it, I'm gay, something cracked open inside me.
Boom.
It was like someone had lit a match in the dark room I didn't even know I was sitting in. I didn't even know I was trans yet. I didn't know a lot of things, but I knew I was seeing something real. Ellen taught me that awkwardness could be brave, that honesty could be funny, that softness could be a kind of armor.
Say what you will about where it ended, but that moment mattered.
It still does. Despite everything, the fallout, the fish, the faux smile daytime era, Ellen DeGeneres cracked open a door. And for those of us standing on the other side, that mattered more than she'll ever know.
Absolutely.
Ellen was radical because it made the invisible visible. It forced American audiences and American advertisers to confront what they had always been willing to laugh at, but never willing to see. It cost Ellen her career, her reputation, and her platform for nearly a decade. But it also paved the road for everything that came later. Will and Grace, Glee, Pose, and the future queer storytelling we now sometimes take for granted.
It walked so they could run. And then capitalism does what it always does. It co-opted the radical, sanded down the edges, and put it on a lunchbox.
So what do we do with Ellen now? We remember her. All of her. The brave one, the awkward one, the complicated one.
Because she changed things, and even if the system devoured her for it, it couldn't erase the cracks she left in the wall.
All right, time for our hammer and sickle rating.
Oh, you know it's time.
We give Ellen, the sitcom, the moment, the cultural fault line, a solid...
We can't wait.
4.5 out of 5.
This was radical when it mattered most. Not because it was perfect, but because it was willing to rupture the comfort zone of 90s network television and say something real.
And then it was punished for it. Swiftly, brutally, commercially.
But that's how capitalism handles authenticity. It weaponizes it, sells it, then eats it alive.
And yet, Ellen's sitcom still survives. It's still here, on streaming, on DVD, in our memory. In that gasp when she says, I'm gay.
It was devoured, but not destroyed. It's one of the only moments in mainstream TV history where coming out actually disrupted the narrative.
4.5 out of 5, because revolution isn't always loud. Sometimes it's awkward, stammering, wearing a vest.
But it still kicks the door open. If you loved today's episode, or if you just love a good cultural takedown with a little Marxist flair, consider joining us on Patreon.
You'll get full articles, bonus episodes, early access, and the warm glow of supporting independent leftist media.
And let's not forget the best part of the Patreon, unscheduled appearances from Myron the Cat.
Oh yes, definitely cannot forget about them.
That's patreon.com/Cinemarch Media. It helps keep the mics on, the takes hot, and the hammer and sickles polished.
This is Marxists at the Movies.
Bye.
White lights dim down low.
Thank you for listening to the Marxists at the Movies podcast. Don't forget to like and comment.
Workers of the world in every frame, changing the credits, rewriting the name. Popcorn power and the working class dream. Each flickers with a revolutionary beam. The heroes rise from the factory floor, challenging the scripts and demanding more. Behind the velvet curtains lies the fight. Directors of destiny taking the light. The dialogue chimes with justice in stride. The proletarian walks where stars collide. Blockbusters topple in an epic